views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. As the weather got colder this fall, tonight's guest visited a Bronx NYCHA project to check on residents who are living in a building with no heat. He greeted a number of the residents, including one senior citizen, and he did his best to offer her comfort despite the unacceptable living conditions. Senator Sepúlveda then went out and got heat restored to the building, and tonight he's here to tell us about that, and more specifically, what does it take to get the most fundamental necessities for beleaguered tenants of the city's public housing projects? We'll also take a look at the upcoming state legislative season and also how implementation of the state's green light law is going. That's the bill that allows undocumented immigrants to apply for driver's license. And we'll review a number of other initiatives as well. Please join me in welcoming the state senator from the 32nd district in the Bronx that includes, and he knows them very well, the Bronx neighborhoods of Parkchester, Castle Hill, Soundview, West Farms, Hunts Point, Longwood, Concourse Village, Melrose, Morrisania, parts of Mott Haven, Claremont, East Tremont, Unionport, Westchester Square, Bronx River, Crotona Park East. Senator Sepúlveda, nice to have you with us.
I'm impressed.
Well, I got the list. You should be impressed.
Wow, I'm impressed that you know all that. That's great. Your research.
It's a pretty large district.
Sure.
Anyway, let's just get right into this NYCHA thing. As you know,
Yes.
we just discussed before, and before we brought you onto the program, I saw that video, and we're going to show that in a second, of you with that senior citizen. Talk about what got you to that project and where the whole thing was at.
The winter is barely started, and the amount of complaints and issues, especially regarding heat at our NYCHA developments in my district, the amount of complaints that we've received is almost unbearable. I mean, many people at the same time suffering conditions with no heat under this extremely cold weather. So what I have been doing with some of my colleagues is going to some of the NYCHA development sites. When we hear about these complaints, we have relationships with the tenant association presidents, and they are key to a lot of this. And Danny Barber, who's the head of sort of like the citywide tenants association, they are key to letting us know a lot of the issues that are happening. And then we also have relationships with people that live in NYCHA developments who call us. So it started very early, places like Consolidated Claremont, Morrisania Air Rights.
I think you had Class and Point.
We have Class and Point that I was having dinner, and I received a call from a friend that said that her mother was without heat, and her mother, I believe, is 86, 87 years old. And, you know, I kind of felt it was wrong for me to be eating dinner in a warm place like that. So we left, we took our food, we left, and I went to visit the woman. And as you can see in the video, such a kind-hearted woman, but she had no heat. Her hands were freezing. I touched her hands because she didn't have gloves on, and I said, your hands are so cold. You know, I said, get her a skull cap. But the woman was so gracious and so selfless that she was more concerned about a child living next door, a 9 or 10-year-old kid who has asthma, and the manifestations of having cold weather on an asthma child. She was so much more worried about that than herself. But this, you know, we did our part. We call everyone at NYCHA that we know we have to call. And fortunately, the next day she had her heat restored.
Well, we're going to review the heat thing. I'm just going to tell you, I'm just so, I told you before the show, I'm so angry about this and so upset. Now, this is one woman You're talking about a whole building. I don't know how many floors in that building. You mentioned other housing complexes. I think I saw a news story that boilers were going to take like 4 years to get replaced. I mean, it just makes no sense. It's not good for anybody. And it's very sad that a state senator has to make a phone call to restore the heat. If it can be restored, why wouldn't the complaints of tenants or residents, or as soon as anybody, a super of the building, knows that there's no heat, why can't they get that same response? It blows my mind, frankly.
Well, I mean, just like a lot of things in life, the squeaky wheel gets the
I guess
grease,
that's what
right?
it is.
So, we have contacts, all of us city council people, state senators, assembly persons. We have contact with governmental entities and representatives from these entities, like the governor's office, the mayor's office, any particular agency. We all have direct contact with the governmental relations individuals. So we can call them. And so it's okay for...
Because they'll listen to you, but a call to 311 is not going to generate...
I don't believe it'll generate because
Wow.
we're in such a crisis now with housing, with public housing, and that started about 45 years ago, with the federal government essentially stopping investing money, investing money.
disinvestment.
It was a complete disinvestment, and you've had bad policies from mayors over the last so many years. I think Bloomberg was exacerbated the situation, which, among other things, why I don't think he should be a candidate for president. But that's a whole other issue. But and so the current mayor was left with a humongous mess, and so he's trying his best, I'm sure, to fix the problem. But it's such a big problem.
Let's show this video before we go further with the dialogue. So this is a woman, I don't know, we need to give her name, but it's a woman who lives in Classen Point. Right. You told the story, you went to visit her. As you know, when I saw it, I said, you know what, we got to bring you on the show to talk about it, because I thought it was quite disturbing. So let's roll the tape.
Put a jacket on.
So we're over here at Classic Point Gardens, where there is no heat, and we have this young lady who's a little bit over 80 years old, who's cold. Her hands are freezing.
You know, you could knock next door. She had her little girl. I think she's 5 or 6. She suffers from asthma. Oh my God. And she's been sick. And she, because this whole line is the same thing.
But we gotta get you warm. Your hands are
I'm gonna be warm. In a little while, I'm gonna eat something. I go back upstairs, and I use my remote control.
Yes, but you have to stay warm.
Yeah.
We're gonna see you. We're gonna reach out. We're going to reach out to NYCHA to make sure they fix this heating problem, okay?
Okay, darling.
In the meantime, you should have a sweater or something.
Oh, no, I'm all right. Because, you see me like this? I have something else underneath here, and I'm upstairs underneath my covers.
All right, we're going to do what we can to make this better. Mommy's fine, Mommy.
I'm all right, please.
She's okay.
All
right, thank you so much. We're going to do what we can. Okay, I wanted to come here and feel it myself.
Okay.
All right, but you got hey, you
try
got gloves for her?
Try next door.
I'll even bring her some, and I told her to bring her a robe.
Or even a skull cap to keep her
I
head warm.
have some.
She's adorable.
These, to me, these are the great people of the Bronx. They are strong and able, and they think about other people. So was it a technical thing? Like somebody just had to light the fire under the boiler? I mean, what happens with these things? I'm just so upset about it.
Well, Classen Point Gardens is sort of like little townhouses. They're not, they're horizontal, they're not vertical. Mm-hmm. So the heating process is through a line of these horizontal like townhouses. And so apparently some of the wiring where the central location emanates from was faulty. And apparently she moved in there almost 30 years ago, and none of that wiring had ever been touched because it's in a hut kind of thing.
Right.
And so they think maybe somebody may have tampered with it or something.
So they just simply straightened it out.
Right. Well, I mean, they went in there a few times. They spent quite a few hours there. But
yeah, I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on it. I know you've been a supporter of Mayor de Blasio, but there have been a number of issues with lead paint and all these other things. So, I mean, I know you criticized Mayor Bloomberg, but de Blasio certainly doesn't get a pass on what has gone on in NYCHA, and his ability to fix things may be hampered by disinvestment, as you say, but he may be part of the problem as well.
Well, look, I don't think there's any particular person that can come up with a complete solution to all the issues we have with NYCHA.
And we're talking about $16 billion would be a good start.
Well, that's correct, and I think $8 billion to put new boilers in the system. Now,
Right.
Obviously, when you're the mayor, the buck stops with the mayor. If you're successful, you get the credit. If you're not succeeding, then you're the failure. You get to be branded the failure. There's certain things that he has tried, and you can't fault him for that. I just think that the problem is so large right now that it's going to take several mayors to fix the issue and get it right. And it's going to take a lot of investment from the federal government back into public housing.
I'm going to just use one word and then we'll move on to a different subject, but the word is commitment. I mean, if there is the commitment to say how I feel about it, maybe other people feel about it, that we can't have this anymore in the Bronx or anywhere in the city.
But I'll give you a name that makes it more difficult, and that's Trump. He's cut federal funding even more. So when we have a president that has that mentality, it's not going to get any better anytime soon.
Let's talk a little bit about your role as chair of, now the formal name of the committee is...
Well, the name is the Corrections, Crimes and Crimes Victim Corrections
Right.
Committee.
And you would, I mean, we have the issue with that Rikers Island is being taken apart, and there's going to be a jail, and one of the replacement jails will be in the South Bronx. But you were talking to me about state corrections, and let's talk about what's happening in state corrections and the kinds of reforms either you've had or you're looking forward to in the next session.
Well, as some of the things that we've been doing before session is meeting with the stakeholders. We've met with advocates, we've met with the president of the respective unions to create a robust agenda for the upcoming session with regards to corrections and crime victims. On the corrections level, we have several bills that can be historic. One is called the Halt Solitary Confinement Bill, which does not stop solitary confinement when needed. It just cuts it at 15 days, and then after 15 days, you can get put into these rehabilitation units to get more services. We're emphasizing services over punishment because all of the empirical data has not established that solitary confinement is an effective method of changing behavior. In fact, it makes them worse and it cuts their lifespan. All this has been established by the Journal of American Medicine. We also have something called RAP, which is the release of aging prisoners. What we're saying is anybody who has been sentenced to 25 years and has served 15 years and is eligible for parole, that they be given the option to go to parole. I'm sorry, that's not eligible, but be given now the option to go before parole, as long as they've done 15 years of their service and they've rehabilitated. They still have to go before the parole board. But these individuals that are no threats really to society, because at 55 and above, again, the evidence establishes that when released, this age group commits the least level of crime. And it costs us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to house them.
But just looking at from the victim's point of view, if God forbid somebody committed a murder or a very serious crime that required let's say 25 or a longer sentence, even if they're rehabilitated, you're letting them out, and the victims' families will say, you know what, this person is now free, I lost my loved one, or I may be living with the ongoing pain of rape or something, significant. Why should he or she be allowed to get out of jail when the original sentence was longer? Even if they're not going to commit another crime, shouldn't that be the punishment because that's what the court ordered?
Gary, I fully appreciate the pain and suffering that families have to suffer that are victims of crime, and we have legislation to help them, to compensate them with their expenses, to help them with their care. We have legislation like that, and we'll continue to do things to help the victims, to continue to sponsor legislation, to have them have some say in the parole hearing process. We appreciate them, we love them, we want them to feel safe. But our society has established that correctional facilities offer rehabilitation. And if an individual has done everything that they're asked to do while incarcerated, getting college degrees, changing their way of life, doing things and then they enter the age in life where they present a very little harm to society, then we have to strike that balance. It costs us about $150,000 per year per inmate in the state of New York. Some of these
to keep them incarcerated.
To keep them incarcerated. You can take this money and you can turn it into services so that you can create even less recidivism, and take some of that money and put it into our schools, put it into college tuition, put it in things like that. We don't need this expense. These individuals are not usually a threat to our society.
The trend nowadays is, as you have already expressed, is in rehabilitation. In the Bronx, we have drug court, and we have alternative treatments for maybe nonviolent offenders. And so the objective, especially considering the financial considerations, is to shrink the population in our state penitentiaries.
Yes.
What happens to the towns that are small towns all over, I mean, maybe not necessarily in New York City, but all over New York State, who say, you know what, a lot of our economy relies on this functioning correctional facility, and you know what, you make it smaller or even close it down, what are we going to do? It's almost like losing a factory. I mean, you'd rather it not be in prisons, but still you're hurting the economy and the health of, you know, law-abiding citizens.
I think you strained a little bit just there when you were explaining setting up what we're going to talk about, when you say, well, clearly we wish it's another industry. I cannot, in my conscience, try to support an industry that puts primarily people of color in prison just to support a local economy. I just cannot do that. I have to do what humanity says we should do, is to try to create an environment where people don't have to go to prison. Now, when these facilities are closed, they get ample notice. The state does everything possible to put them into other facilities, and the state commits to investing money into these areas to spur the economy. But, you know, unfortunately, I'm a person that is a person of faith and believe that we have to do the right thing in society. And if that means choosing between keeping a prison industry afloat and putting people in prison, or decreasing the prison population, I'm going to decrease the prison population.
Let's talk about the Green Light Bill. You were a sponsor, as I recall, of that bill, and I think after it passed, you were here and we talked about it. How's it going? Have undocumented people been getting driver's licenses, and has it been implemented in an efficient manner? Give us kind of an update of, and the whole idea was that the people who are undocumented would still be allowed to get the ID and also a driver's license to be able to move about.
Well, just to get a driver's license,
Yes.
not a non-driver's ID, but certainly.
Well, I mean, the license becomes an ID of sorts, but.
Right. But in order for them to get the ID, they have to get the driver's license. It can't be sort of like they can go get their individual ID just for the
That's
ID.
true. Okay.
I just want to make that clear.
You
'cause
should make that clear,
It's very
yes.
important. So yeah, that was a big fight for us last year. No one thought we'd get it done. I'm very thankful to the leader. I'm very thankful to the Attorney General because she issued a statement saying that it's going to pass any constitutional challenge. And so we were in that phase now. It's been a boxing match, so to speak.
Still to this day.
To this day, it's been a boxing match. I think we're in the last round. We were able to kick Mickey Kern's ass in court. Excuse my language, but I'm very emotional about this. He's a Democrat who challenged the bill up in Erie County, and now I believe Rensselaer County. They are now trying to appeal these decisions, and everywhere they go, they lose. I don't understand why. It's the law now, and it's a law that's going to help many people in the state. It's going to make good for the economy. It's going to make us safer, and it's going to certainly help us get lower insurance rates. So these are good things that are going to happen to us. Yet you have still these groups of people that want to stop it at all costs.
Well, you know, I'm going to re-ask questions I'm sure I asked you when the bill came up last spring. People are going to say, because it is what's out there, and you know what I'm about to ask you, these are people who are undocumented, should not have been in this country, should not be in this country. Why are we going to give them the privilege of being able to use our roadways to drive around and function? Maybe we ought to send a message that this is not what we want in the United States.
Well, before Pataki issues executive order, sometime during 9/11, the undocumented immigrant can always get a driver's license here. Having a social security number was never a requirement. So for decades, I mean, not decades because you didn't have driver's licenses 100 years ago, but ever since the issuance of driver's licenses for motor vehicles, you never had to have a social security number. Anybody can get a driver's license in the state of New York. It wasn't until Pataki, in his infinite wisdom, issued that executive order.
You say that sarcastically?
Oh,
I
very
assume.
sarcastically, dripping with sarcasm.
Okay.
And as a result, these individuals they're here already. They've been in this country. They've been in this state for many, many years. You're talking about 750,000 individuals that live in the state of New York. They're already driving on our roads. They have children that have been born here. They have children that have diseases, have children that need medical attention, that need school attention. These are people that can't do this in many cases for these children. Plus, they're already driving on our roads. So you can live in this concept or you can live in reality. The reality is that they're driving on our roads without automobile insurance and without getting the written exam and the practical exam and everything that comes with that. They're already on our roads. So we can't ignore the fact that all these things come together. When you have this, it makes us safer. So they're here already. Let's make our roads safer and let's spur our economy. In any state where legislation that allows undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses that have passed this, and we're talking 13, not a single one has moved to change the bill, to change the law, to repeal the law. It's been very successful.
Has it lowered insurance rates?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Now, it's not a major decrease, but it's a decrease. And to some people, that's a good thing. But, look at, Connecticut beat us to us. They did this back in 2011. So it's been very successful everywhere that the bill has become a law, that the undocumented immigrants have been given the right to drive. The laws have been very successful with their respective states. And I know that by the way, the first time you can apply will be December 16th. DMV is still promulgating the rules and regulations. But I know that once it goes into effect, a year from now, we're going to be talking about how successful it's been.
Let's talk a little bit about the upcoming legislative season. We're slowly, we all know it's almost holiday time. We're getting to the end of the year. Mm-hmm. What do you have on your horizon? I know what is out there certainly is dealing with our health insurance and how we're going to deal with health care in the state of New York. Is that at the top of your list? And how do you see the session playing out in terms of priorities?
Health insurance is going to be a big issue. Certainly, and
are you a single payer guy?
I'm a single payer guy.
You think that it's doable and can be done without breaking the budget?
I think it's very doable, and I think we're fortunate that we have Gustavo Rivera, who's from the Bronx, as the chair of the health committee, and I know that his heart is in the right place, and he's going to work hard to get this resolved.
All right, so that's number one. What else you got?
Well, 1 and 1A with education, everything for me always starts with that. The budget that's coming up and getting as much as I can in the budget for my district and for the city of New York. That's a big one for us. And then I have responsibilities as a chair of the corrections committee.
So let's just go back to before you move forward. Mm-hmm. As far as education, for you it's a funding issue?
Always a funding issue.
And how?
And not only a funding issue, let's be honest, it's also a quality of educators issue. Because again, there's been some information out there that usually the teachers that are least qualified are sent to the Bronx. And so I've been very vigilant for that for a couple of years, because there's no reason why our children should be getting the bottom of the barrel. They should be getting the best because they need the most help.
Is that a matter of incentivizing with higher pay for people who work in underperforming schools?
No, not necessarily, because everybody gets paid the same. I mean, if you're a teacher and you're dedicated and you're good, it doesn't matter. You all get paid the same. Mm-hmm. So I think that these teachers should be, those that have been evaluated that have essentially all the bottom of the barrel, should be put into training and get the services that they need to be better teachers and bring me the best teachers to the Bronx. And then of course the funding issue is the second issue.
Charter school cap, is it where it should be, or do you believe we ought to authorize more charters?
Well, I think let's leave it where it's not. Let's fill the ones that haven't been filled yet, and then work in the future.
So you're saying that there are open charters, let's fill those and then see how we're
and then let's discuss expansion. Now look, there's no secret, I have been an advocate at charter schools, with the caveat that, and I've told the UFT and the charter school advocates and groups that I want to do nothing that takes anything away, funding or otherwise, from our traditional public schools. But people have to realize that charter schools are public schools, and the children that are there are public school children also. And so what I try to do is work together with both groups and get the best out of both to implement both ways. But I have many charter schools in my district, and the children in these schools are doing very well.
Of course, we don't need to spend more time on it, but the biggest issue is the selectivity of who gets into the charter schools. Many people believe that they cherry pick who they want, so then the numbers look particularly strong.
Well, it's the case in some schools, but there are schools that are fair, and I will not penalize those schools for those that maybe don't have a fair process.
Before we run out of time, I want to ask you a couple of political questions, in particular the race to replace Congressman Serrano. It's getting bigger and bigger. As we speak, there are more candidates announcing. Yeah. You have a favorite horse, somebody you think you're ready to endorse? You've always been an independent thinker. I mean, people could say he's a clubhouse politician, but it wouldn't be accurate because you don't always follow the trend. Do you have a favorite horse?
Well, I can't be pigeonholed. So.
I guess that's the way to say it. You say it any way you want.
Well, look, the most important thing, I mean, other than the necessities that we need in our communities, monies for housing, which, by the way, is another big topic for us, housings. In my office, the busiest office in the entire state is my office, political office, I should say. Mm-hmm. We get almost 10,000 constituent visits a year.
10,000?
10,000. We're at almost 8,300 right now, and the year's not over.
Wow.
My office is a social service office, and we do 80% of it is housing. Mm-hmm. So that's clearly a very important issue.
Is this a legislative thing? I mean, we've already talked about funding, but I mean...
It's a combination of many, many things.
All right, before we run out of time,
right.
I want to hear your answer to my question.
So, to me, the most important thing other than that is defeating Trump. I think he's a national disaster. He's an embarrassment for this country, and I think he's hurting the very people that I represent more than anyone else. And so I want to send a representative there that I know will have that mindset to stand up for our people and will never praise the president as a great president or talk about how wonderful he is in my community. And so it has to be a progressive liberal candidate. Mm-hmm. And there
of which there could be 5.
There are many there. To me, that's my only requirement.
And so it sounds like you haven't selected a name. I don't want to list the name because if I name 1 or 2 or 3, there could be 5 others that are already ready.
I have not selected any candidates. I've worked with many of the candidates that are there. And I think, again,
you're looking for a progressive thinker?
I'm looking for a progressive thinker, and many of them have progressive values and concepts, but then many have less progressive values and so forth. Nothing is 100% pure, and I don't want to fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm. Would you recommend that some drop out so that we get a little more clarity in the race? And certainly someone who has supported President Trump is Reverend Diaz. If they all cancel each other out, he could end up winning. Would you recommend that they narrow the field?
I would never tell someone to drop out of a race. I was told that when I started in electoral politics for myself. So everybody, eventually, whoever's able to deliver their message the best is going to win and deserves to win. If you can't deliver it, then you don't deserve to win.
Senator Louis Sepúlveda, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for visiting seniors, and let's keep them all warm.
Thank you.
I don't know what else to say.
And thank you. This gives attention and brings more attention to the issue and helps us in our deliberations.
That's why we do it. Thank you so much. All right, folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then you send us an email at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org, or you send us a tweet at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page. Our producer is Helen Greenberg. The director is Katrina Kelly. We also want to thank Abele, who did a little extra work this week. And we'll see you next week. Happy holidays. All the best. Good night.